Thanks, guys. Great to be here. And so, really interesting polling data coming out of Brown University, one of the Ivy League institutions, and unbelievable, almost. Except, it's just so pervasive now. But according to a new poll commissioned by the student-run newspaper, there, the number of homosexual, bisexual, and transgender students, the LGBTQ plus whatever, has more than doubled over the last decade or so. When they first started doing this poll in late 2010, they had about 14% of their students who identified as one of the letters. Now they've got almost 40% identifying with one of those letters. If you break down the data a little bit further, what you'll find is that while homosexuality or self-proclaimed homosexuality has only increased by a little over 25%, bisexual identification has surged by 230%. And then get this one's unbelievable. The number of students who are identifying as some other sexual orientation, like queer, pansexual, asexual, that number skyrocketed to almost 800%. Or by almost 800% since they first started these surveys over a decade ago. And over 5% of the students said they were either non-binary or gender queer. So pretty fascinating stuff. One of the students that was quoted for the article, Josephine Kovetches, claimed that this was because of more social acceptance of LGBTism. She was quoted in the paper as saying that queer people haven't been able to be open about their identifications for that long. So it's exciting that the numbers are growing and that queer people are able to be open about what they are. So open in particular at Brown. So, folks, we have here an epidemic of LGBTism at this ultra-liberal Ivy League school. And, of course, it's even more extreme than what's going on across the broader United States. At Brown University, students are 5 times more likely than the average American adult to identify as one of the LGBTQ plus whatever letters that they keep adding. But still, these same trends are being seen all across the nation as we see this just relentless LGBT propaganda campaign by big media, big business, and the big government-funded so-called education system. If you look at the polling, it continues to soar. The number of LGBT people continues to soar with every generation. A Gallup poll from last year showed that about 7% of adults were now LGBTQ. But if you look at the younger generation, those kids between 18 and 25, you have about 20% identifying as LGBTQ plus. And you've got some polls showing that even less than half of teenagers identify as heterosexual, just plain old normal. I guess normal is boring. And folks, to be clear, this kind of stuff is happening even in the most conservative areas of the country. We broke the news some years ago at the Newman Report for Freedom Project Media, showing that even in Utah, right, one of the most conservative states in the country, we're seeing these same trends. In 2015, comparing the data from the state medical prescriptions database with the data from 2020 showed a 10,000% increase in the number of minor girls who are going through what they call gender transitions. So this is where they start injecting testosterone, breast removal, hysterectomies, things like this. 10,000% increase in one of the most conservative states, where both houses of the legislature, almost every county, the governor's office, all in the hands of Republicans. And so this is, I think, pretty interesting. We keep hearing from the LGBT crowd that you're born a homosexual, that it's genetic, there's some sort of gay gene that mysteriously we haven't been able to find. But if that's true, how do you explain this absolute explosion in identification with one of these LGBT letters? In reality, I think this data completely debunks that claim. A lot of experts are now talking about something they refer to as social contagion, where something kind of becomes cool or trendy. So you got a lot of these brainwashed young people thinking that they'll be cooler if they pick a letter. And of course, critical theory is a part of this too. We've talked about it on this program. When you tell all these kids, like, well, if your ancestors came from Europe, you're by definition an evil oppressor. But if you were to hypothetically choose an alphabet letter and pretend to be bisexual, homosexual, transgender, genderqueer, non-binary, then you could be part of the oppressed as well. And then you don't have to be one of those evil white supremacist, heteronormative, cisgender, evil oppressors of the patriarchy. But even as we see this just explosion in LGBTism, the public acceptance is actually dramatically falling. A recent Gallup poll showed the number of Republicans who say homosexual relations are morally acceptable actually plunged by 15% in 1 year, down to about 41% this year. Among Americans more broadly, the numbers fell by 7%. So now less than 2/3 of Americans consider homosexual relations to be morally acceptable. But folks, what's happening at Brown University and other Ivy League universities really should be cause for alarm. These universities claim to be creating future leaders of our businesses, of our government, of our institutions. So think about what this means, the skyrocketing number of self-proclaimed LGBTQ plus L whatever things adherents. Folks, this is unbelievably significant. It's hard to overstate the significance of this on the future, even just from a demographic perspective, right? I mean, if you're a homosexual or you're chopping off your parts, you're not going to be having babies. You're not going to be creating a family, and we're already in a time of plummeting birth rates to the point where they're way below replacement levels. We're talking here about civilizational suicide, folks, and the elites, if you will, at the elite universities, or at least elitist universities, are at the forefront of this dramatic change. Folks, this is a crisis. It's going to be a catastrophe if we don't deal with it, and that begins in the home with parents. Thanks, guys.